Are you a professional services business looking to implement a new ERP system, or you're thinking about changing systems? If that's the case, you're in the right place. In this video, I'm going to run through the 8 phases of a typical ERP implementation for a professional services business. Hi, my name is Mike Hiley, and I am the founder of Hiley Solutions. We provide consulting solutions to professional services organizations, and we do that because we've got decades and decades of experience of working in professional services businesses ourselves, and we've done well over 1,000 projects in this sector. Today, I actually want to talk to you about one of our niche services, which is ERP implementation. And I want to run you through what a typical ERP implementation entails, because every single ERP implementation needs to have these 8 steps. The first one is the planning stage. This is typical project plan. And actually, the only reason we don't talk about project initiation is actually, if you read my book, by the time you've actually got to the ERP implementation itself, you should have finished the actual initiation phase. So the first phase of relevance is actually the planning phase. In that phase, you basically would do anything that's exactly the same task you would do in a typical ERP in any actual project plan. So you would be planning the scope of the project, the budget of the project, planning all the communications related to the rollout of their system. You would be planning your resources if you hadn't already done so, for the schedule, and then obviously things that are typically missed, the quality, and also the risks around the implementation, because those are the things that actually are typically overlooked. And in my opinion, one of the main reasons why a lot of ERP implementations fail. The next stage is going to be the discovery or the design phase. Every ERP implementation partner has a different terminology for it or different phrase for it, but they basically do the same things. They need to understand how your business works in order for them to configure and customize the solution for your business needs. One thing to be very clear about is the distinction between customization and configuration. Configuration is a good thing because it basically means that the functionality that you're looking for is in the system, and therefore they just need to configure it to meet your specific needs. If you've purchased a system that's specifically tailored for professional services businesses, that should be 95 or virtually all of the work that needs to be done. Customization, on the other hand, is specific development of the system to meet your requirements. So that means that a developer would actually need to do some additional work to get the system to meet your specific requirements. The reason why I always recommend we avoid customizations as much as possible, because during an upgrade, you will probably have to pay for that again, or you have to pay for that customization to be upgraded to the new version of the system. So that's just something that you have to be super careful of, and can be very, very expensive. I used to work with a guy that used to say that customization was the gift that always keeps giving. The only thing is that the giving is always to the ERP supplier and not to yourselves. Okay, so that aside, that's the discovery phase. The next phase, actually, which follows obviously from that, is the configuration and development. So the ERP partner or your ERP supplier will effectively go away and they will configure the system to meet your business needs. And if required, they will do some customization. Depending on the size of the system, will take either a short amount of time or a long amount of time, but they will need to do that. And after they do that is another super, super vital part of the implementation, which is the testing, sometimes known as user acceptance testing, UAT, but it does need to be, and this is another critical part of the implementation. You have to test the system to make sure that it meets your business requirements, not the ERP partner, not anyone else. It has to be your team that has to test the system to make sure that it meets your business requirements, and they need to be secure and comfortable that the system will work for them in their day jobs. So the way I like to approach testing is in 2 ways. One is to make sure that the system, you create proper test plans, test scripts, and make sure the system does what it's meant to do. But you also need to take a step back and actually have users go in the system and go, okay, and decide what are they going to do. What do they typically do on a typical day, at the end of a month, at the end of a quarter, at the end of the year, and make sure that they are comfortable that they can do that in the new system. Because the number of times we've come to a company because they've had they're 3 months after they've gone live on a system and they've suddenly realized that it's not doing something that they critically need. And that is very, very complicated to deal with after the go live. After the testing, then obviously you will need to prepare the organization for the implementation of the new system. Taking a step back, obviously during the planning stage, I talked about communication plan, and during the remainder of the implementation, you should be regularly communicating the status of the project to not only leadership but the rest of the business, so that they are engaged, they understand that something is coming. And then when you're at the preparing the organization stage, you should also just be making sure that they understand when the go live is, what they need to do, how it's going to impact them, and so on and so forth. That's also the stage when you also will need to be training users. Certainly the advanced users, the people who are going to be doing the more advanced stuff in the system, they will need to be trained prior to go live. The end users, people who typically, and again, if you're a professional services company, these are the people who are typically going to be entering timesheets, entering expense claims, collaborating in the system. If you've got a collaboration module, those people typically will need to be trained immediately before or immediately after go live. And again, my suggestion is always to do that immediately after go live, because then you can train them on the system and then they can just get on and just start using it. So that's the prepare organization. The next stage, again, which is super critical and actually does need to be considered at the beginning of the project during the planning stage, is the data migration. Now, the data migration is where you migrate all of your legacy information to the new system from the old system. And actually, data falls into 3 different categories. One is the configuration data. So for example, if it's an ERP system, it will be things like your chart of accounts, basic configuration settings, different types of projects that you work with, whether it's time and materials, fixed price, milestone projects, or a combination of all of the above. Then that also needs to be migrated during the configuration stage, so that can be tested during the actual configuration and the user acceptance testing. The next set of data is actually your master data. This is things like your clients, your suppliers, employees. From some professional services organizations, you would also include your jobs or your projects or engagements or whatever you want to call them. But that would typically be the case if you have very long-term projects and they aren't going to be changing on a regular basis. In the majority of cases, projects actually fall into the next category, which is your transactional data. So this is obviously the transaction, open projects, open work in progress, timesheets, invoices, and so on those projects. So that's your transactional data, and that will actually need to be migrated immediately after your go live, because typically what will happen is you will have to close your month on your old system before you actually can migrate the data onto your new system. So that's why with those 3 types of data: configuration data that needs to be included in the initial configuration of the system, master data that is typically imported into the system immediately before the go live, and then your transaction data that is typically implemented after your go live, because you don't need the transaction data for people to actually enter new transactions in the system. The transaction data you're migrating is the data from your old system that's relevant to the new system. Then finally, you have your go live. As the name suggests, that's actually when the system launches and people start using the system as their production, as their typical. I was going to use the words using the system in anger as actually their production system. And that's when people go in and start entering data in the system. It's obviously a delicate time of the project. It's obviously where we have all of the first impressions, so all of the preparation is where is super key in this stage of the project, and you have to have people, internal and external people, to be there on hand to assist people and answer any questions. If you've done your testing properly, you shouldn't have any major issues. There will obviously be lots and lots of questions, and there'll be people having to get used to a new system and stuff like that. Finally, you've got your post go live. So that's really your ongoing assistance. And again, this is something that is typically overlooked by a lot of organizations, because once you go live on a system, that isn't the end of your investment and your commitment to the system. The system provider should be upgrading the system or creating new functionality on a regular basis, and your organization needs to make sure that it's aware of that, so that they can assess the new functionality and incorporate it into the workflows and into the business systems. You also need to have a deep team of people who should also be available to make sure that the processes are updated and that they are around to train any new users. Because actually, again, another piece of advice that I'd give you from my years and years of experience is that the worst people to train a new user on a process is somebody when they're just about to walk out the door. Typically, it's because they're not motivated. They're thinking about their new job. They also probably are not experts in the system, so they will just teach the new user exactly how they did things in the old system, and they probably are not leveraging the system to the maximum benefit. So again, the post go live phase is again a very important phase for ERP implementations. Anyway, I hope you find this video useful. If you do, hit the like button and then subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much.